Starting. Okay, hi guys, welcome to another 8:15 p.m. Wednesday night live stream. I have a very hang on, I can hear the computer going off. Okay, I have a very special guest today. She is a fantastic dance partner on a cruise. I met her at the Friedman conference, and in case you can't tell from the little box below, my special guest today is the one and only Jacinta Price. Say hello.
Hi, everyone. Hello, and thank you for having me, dear.
Oh, no, it's really good to have you. I've actually been thrilled to have you, and I tried to get you like a year ago, but I suppose I wasn't anything then. So I wasn't. You were not deserved then, but now I feel like I deserve you.
That's too funny.
Well, we met at the Friedman conference, which for those who don't know, the Friedman conference is actually very much a libertarian oriented event. I myself do not identify purely as a libertarian. I'd say I'm a soft libertarian, but I'm sort of figuring things out and learning things as I go, figuring out what my political views are. Where do you lie on that? How do you actually identify in terms of the political spectrum? What are your identifiable words?
Well, I guess I'm centre right. There are, I certainly share a few libertarian values, but I draw the line at others. I consider myself a conservative, and there's probably elements of left values there that I hold as well. So, I'm a bit of a mix.
You mean you think for yourself? What?
I know, right? Amazing. I think for myself. Yeah.
Did you like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, aside from lots of selfies that we took together and getting to know you in Sydney, I've just been doing extra research on you because I knew I'd be interviewing you. And it's funny to me that you have been introduced to many in the Australian public as alt-right. Where does that come from, and how does that make you feel?
Look, it's laughable. I think it's absolutely laughable. And
me too, by the way.
Yeah, we're totally apparently alt-right. I don't know how that is. And I've been referred to as a Nazi and like a racist and all that kind of stuff before. All coming from, snowflakes who really, who don't get me, who don't understand me. So therefore I scare them, and they don't have the capability to really want to understand who I am really and what it is I am trying to achieve. And anything that I do try to bring across gets twisted into their own idea of what they think is going on, which really renders them clueless.
Well, yeah, that's the unfortunate world we're currently living in, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what is your mission with the Indigenous community? Like, give us a rundown, because I think you're not given often much of a chance to explain it outright. So
yeah, sure,
go for it.
Well, I've grown up. My mother's a Warrapari woman, and I've grown up very close to my family and understanding, the culture that I've been a part of all my life. I speak Warrapari. I don't speak it fluently, but I speak it and I understand it being spoken. Talk to my family all the time in Warrapari. But I know, I've grown up with my culture. So, and I've known those elements of my culture that I believe are detrimental for my mob. And I think, but also understanding Western culture and Western civilization and how we've had the ability to use constructive criticism in order to further ourselves. We haven't been able to, firstly, the world was dropped on our doorstep. My grandparents remember first seeing white people in their early adolescence.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's been, it's only a couple of generations where huge, massive change has happened, and my mob are still trying to catch up with that change. And we haven't really adopted this idea of using constructive criticism in order to be able to look at why do we do things, look at our culture and say, why do we do these things that way and these, things this way, and just reflect upon, what it all means to us. We sort of say, we've been doing this for 60,000 years, so therefore we've got to keep doing it this way. Culture is unchanged. And I think a lot of that narrative is driven by those who are actually removed from traditional culture and who are trying to hold on to whatever it is they can because they do feel a deep sense of loss. But living in that culture and being part of it and seeing my own family suffer because of some of those elements that don't serve us anymore, I want to be able to say, point out, this isn't working for us. We need to do things better. We need to do things differently because we can't keep burying our family at alarming rates. We can't keep seeing family violence, the cycle continue, and say, oh, you can't talk about those things. You're not allowed to talk about it. There's sacred men's business, there's sacred women's business. And when it comes to knowledge is power. And it is also, in terms of wealth, knowledge was wealth. So I get the importance of having that. But because there are those elements of secrecy, I believe is also, for men, it provides an opportunity to control women, control society, which is, pretty much what's gone on in Western society in the past as well. And some would probably argue it still exists now. But, like rules that my people live by, that if me as a woman, if I accidentally come across sacred men's business, then I could be severely punished. My punishment could lead to death. There's things like if a woman were to lose her child, if her child dies, from a premature illness, there's, premature death from illness, then sorcery is usually to blame. And that sorcery is usually, you've got to find someone to blame for that. But usually it's the mother. So the mother would traditionally be punished. So a mother not only loses her child, but then she is, she's punished through physical violence. So there are elements that condone violence within my culture. And, when I try to point these things out to the wider community to better understand, because you can't fix these problems unless you understand them, then I get called all kinds of names. And the thing that I realize is that there's a lot of people out there who'll say, oh, how can you sell your own people out? Shame job, you're talking about your own culture. That's embarrassing. No, I'm trying to bring out these truths that lie within my culture in order to fix some of these problems. If you want to bury them, if you want to call them shame job, if you want to, say you're a sellout for speaking the truth, then you're part of the problem. And unfortunately, since I've really been quite vocal and public about it, well, actually, you have to see this in a positive way. It's not just unfortunate, but it's fortunate as well, because it highlights just the level of the problem that we have out there, the way that people can accept these sorts of things or outright try to deny them because they live in an urban context and don't live within the confines of traditional culture. I mean, I remember sitting in the Insight audience with my nephew and my son, and my nephew, who's so his father is my white cousin, but his mother is a Warlpiri woman, also from Rindamu. So so he's this combination, the same combination as I am. He's
your son.
White fella and Warlpiri, and his older sibling, who is Warlpiri, just Warlpiri. She was murdered and killed in a town camp in Alice Springs, and she left behind 2 little boys. And those boys, we ensured that they could have a better chance at life. And so they spent their years growing up in Newcastle. But my nephew and I try to put it forward to Indigenous people in other areas and on this panel on Insight, we were talking about the fact that in communities, you got 3-year-olds with syphilis, and in that audience were members of, grandmothers against removal, and they just said, "Oh, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. That's not what's going on." And we're saying, no, this is what is going on. And if you just want to deny it, then you're part of the problem. You've got to acknowledge that this is what's going on. And then, of course, following on from there, there's been all kinds of issues being brought to light in the media. The 2-year-old in Tennant Creek who was raped, and
Oh, mhm.
these horrible instances, they're things that I've known of all my life. They're the reason why I'm speaking out. They're the reason why I'm encouraging my family to consider solving our problems by facing up to them and taking responsibility for them.
That's a lot to unpack.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It
Well,
is a lot.
you brought a lot to light. Why? It's very tragic that what is happening in the Aboriginal community. Now, that brings forth my question about Kerry Ann Connolly and Yumi Steins, that whole drama. I just have my notes here about that, so I'll just bring those up. So what happened specifically was that Kerry Ann Connolly has this is the quote: "Has any single one of those 5,000 people waving the flag saying how inappropriate the day is, has any one of them been out to the outback where babies and 5-year-olds are being raped by their mothers and being raped by their sisters are being raped. They get no education." And then Yumi says that women aren't being raped here in big cities and children aren't being raped in big cities, which is really stupid for her to say, because if we look at the stats, and I know that you've worked in this industry where you do a lot of research as well, the stats actually prove that every 46 in 1,000 is substantiated, and that as neglect and abuse in the Aboriginal community. So they are 7 times more likely than non-Indigenous children to be the subject of substantiated reports of harm and risk. So that in itself proves that Kerry Ann Kennelly was actually going off statistics, and Yumi was going off emotion and virtue signaling.
Exactly.
So you've seen this. You've literally witnessed this. You know this is happening, and you speak out against it. But for whatever reason, people don't want you to, because the intervention is seen as wrong.
Yeah, that's right. It's like, of course there's embarrassment attached to that. Who wouldn't be embarrassed because of those sorts of statistics? And what really aggravates me further is the fact that when I mention these statistics, I'm talking about these statistics. People have the nerve to turn around and say, "How dare you demonize our men?" I have never, ever said that all Aboriginal men are rapists. I've never said anything like that. In fact, I have talked about men, in my own family, who are wonderful examples of how men should be, and I've never painted all Aboriginal men with that brush. All I have done is focused on the statistics of the victims, who the victims are, and the fact that there are so many victims, and it is a real to take the spotlight and turn it around and make out as though who's really hurting in all of this is the men is pathetic. And if that's how men feel, they need to step up, because it's about, if you're a real man, you're more concerned about the victims, about the women and about the children, and about doing a better job to ensure that we lower the levels of violence, we lower the levels of sexual abuse, which in turn will lower the levels of incarceration. Hello. That's the other argument, is that, we can hear it all the time. You hear the rapper Briggs bang on about it. "Oh, we've got the highest rates of incarceration." Little does he ever talk about the highest rates of, sexual abuse and family violence. It's always the highest rates of incarceration. Well, 70% of our men who are incarcerated for violent crimes against their own loved ones. Now, imagine if we actually address this issue and those levels of violence dropped, we would see a dramatic drop in the levels of incarceration rates as well. And, you know, people like Yumi just anger me because,
She's an idiot.
well, yeah, apart from that,
Oh, she just is.
she's failing to recognize, she's silencing the victims. She is playing her part in silencing those victims. But trying to shut Kerry Ann down, she's saying, sorry, but those victims' voices need to be shut down as well. And that, you know, that's criminal. I think that's criminal. And she did not have the backbone to come on the program the next day knowing that I was going to be there on the panel either.
I know, I saw that. Yeah, I remember. I just before we continue, can everyone hear me? I know everyone in the chat saying that they can't hear me. Can you hear me? Just say yes or no. No one's responding. Respond. Is it still too low? Okay, they're not responding, so I'm just gonna carry on. All right, so someone just, apparently it's still too low. I can't turn it up. I've done what I can. I can just take out my headphones. Talk through the computer. Is that better? Can you hear me, Jacinta?
Oh yeah, I can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay, everyone else can. All right, cool. All right, sorry about that. All right, so I agree with you that it's really ridiculous that what we're doing is that we're basically silencing an epidemic. It's an epidemic that men in general, now because they are Black men, you're not allowed to say it, but it is a crime against humanity. It is a crime against our children in our human family to be permitting this crime to continue. And it is also unfair, in my view, and I think most would agree, to allow a child to stay with an abusive parent when they could be taken out of a dangerous situation and given to a loved one or a different family member or hopefully a well-vetted foster home where they can be taken out of a sexual abuse environment. But because it is wrong to say that, because it is racist to say that, we can't help fix the problem. And that is just heartbreaking. And it's the same thing with the African American community, the Mexican American community, and unfortunately we have it here as well. How do we remedy this? Like, how do we fix this? What do you think? Because until leftism and PC culture can deteriorate again to a point of sanity, this problem is going to continue. So what do you think is the antidote?
Well, we're supposed to uphold the rights, the human rights of children and of women. That's what we're supposed to do. And unfortunately, when you belong to, you know, an ethnic minority, then you get rolled into the rights of your ethnicity. Your rights as a woman and your rights as a child become second rate.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened in terms of the Indigenous community. While we were busy fighting for the rights of Indigenous people, which largely we've won over, if we look at our country's history, the rights of women and children, you know, had to take a back seat, but continue to take a back seat to this day, because then we get the argument that, you know, children who are being removed from these situations for the benefit of holding up their rights, so they have the right to live in a loving, caring, nourishing environment free of sexual abuse and violence, because, you know, we want that. We're being told, you know, we can't because their culture comes first, based on the argument of a stolen generation. So, which is an entirely different set of circumstances, and a set of circumstances that we have never heard all the stories of either, because all we hear is one narrative through that.
That's very true.
Yeah, it is.
It's very honest. It's just, I'm surprised you're saying it.
Look, I know that there were children that were wrongly removed who should never have been removed, but there were children that were removed also, you know, to save their lives. There were also, you know, white parents in the mix who didn't want their child to be removed, who also suffered themselves. And the focus has always been on, you know, the children, and there's never necessarily been much focus even on the mothers who were still out in those communities living the lives that they were living without their children. But to get back to what I was saying, right now, these circumstances are entirely different. And if we want to talk about culture, then the circumstances that they're living in is within a dysfunctional culture. So until that culture is functioning in such a way that it can properly support those children, then it should not be the priority for those kids. And, you know, give them the opportunity to grow and develop into wholesome adults.
Mm.
And then when they have that strength, they can find out more about who they are. I mean, we all come into, at some stage in our life, an identity crisis of some sort. Everyone does it, no matter what's happened to you in your life. And it's your journey to come through and figure that out for yourselves. And what we need to do is build strong, resilient little human beings so they can become wholesome adults, who can be healthy and who can bring up healthy families and contribute to society and not just survive but thrive successfully as well.
Yes. Well, a big issue I think that exists in in a lot of communities today is that they say the formula for success is three things. This is something that Ben Shapiro and Kirk Fitzpatrick have also said. The prominent American conservatives. The formula for success is one, get an education. Two, be married when you have babies, and I forgot what the third one was. So basically, that'll lead you out of poverty. So marriage, or having a baby after marriage, and getting an education. Now, I know we were talking a moment ago earlier, and you did say, like me, that you were educated for a while, but then you dropped out. But that doesn't take away from the fact that you are still technically extremely educated. Your parents are extremely educated. You worked at the research. You were a research associate with the Center for Independent Studies, with your mother, who is she's done a lot. I don't even know like where to begin with her, because she's definitely breaks the mold, right, of the typical Aboriginal narrative, which is that, oh yeah, all they do is this and all they do is that. But
Absolutely.
yeah, no, your mum kicks ass. I've seen your mum. Like when you showed me a photo of your mum on the cruise, I'm like, oh my god, I've seen her on TV. Like I was like, that's your mum. I was so shocked.
You
But
know, I just have to say, with
go ahead.
my mother, like she is an incredible woman.
She is.
She was born under a tree. She grew up in a humpy, which is like a makeshift shelter. She grew up in a
Oh,
humpy. Her English is a third language to her.
oh,
She
okay.
got a university degree when I was a little girl. She went on to become a minister of the Crown. Um,
Wow.
she's never taken a single welfare payment in her entire life. She's worked from the age of 15. She
Mm,
became a mother with my brother when she was 14. And I lost my brother when I was 3 years old. But she's been through an incredible journey, my mother. And I take my hat off to her for someone who's, the English language to her is a third or fourth language to her, and she's achieved all of those things. So, yeah, I've got a lot to thank my mother for.
yeah, absolutely. Your mother sounds incredible. And what I like about her is that, and yourself, is that you prove that you don't need to be, and for lack of a better word, I feel like what the left does and what our government is doing is that they are enabling bad behavior. And I know that sounds a bit rough, and I don't mean that in an offensive way, but don't you agree that
Mhm.
what is happening in the Aboriginal community, which is the same thing that is happening in the African American community, is that you're being pandered to and you're being infantilized. That's the word. You're being infantilized. Like, here you go. Here's a bit of money for ab study. We're sorry about what we did to you hundreds of years ago. Here you go. Here's some money for your housing projects because we don't think you have the capacity to work for it. And, here you go. Do you think that's helpful, or do you think they need to get up off their ass and do what your mum did and do what you did?
Absolutely. And, my grandparents would be rolling in their grave if they knew,
Mm,
the ways that people are behaving. My grandparents weren't anybody's victim, and they went through incredible change in their lifetime, and they never stopped working, and they rolled with the punches. And,
mm,
despite the fact that they, experienced such adversity throughout their lives, they never blamed anyone for that. They didn't blame white people. They didn't blame government or any of those things. They just knew life was bloody hard. I mean, it was hard enough before white fellas came into their lives, when they were, when all they had was their bare naked bodies against the elements in the middle of Australia, in this environment, surviving off the land. The possibility of coming under attack by your traditional enemies, facing violence, and living in that environment, but living very happily and with a great sense of humour. And then, this new world comes along, and knowing that they had to go with it. They had to go with those changes. My grandfather took on a number of different jobs. He worked as a groundsman at the school. He took mail on camelback throughout communities. He worked as a tracker for police. He laboured in the army. He was forced to labour in the army. He was chained around the neck and marched to these trucks, and then put on the trucks and sent into Alice Springs and forced to labour, and built this town. But he never looked at those times as, he never resented it. And in fact, he was proud that he worked as an army labourer. And so, and I have a lot of, I have to be thankful for my grandparents for instilling those sorts of values in my mother and in me as well. And so, never ever hand your power over to somebody else. And the minute you start blaming somebody else for your problems, you've effectively handed over your power. You are powerless to them. And I take the attitude of my grandparents. Traditional Aboriginal people, they don't. I guess they accept human beings as human beings, and no matter what skin color you come in, and they never regard them. They always regard themselves as everybody else's equal. They could be standing next to the Queen, and they'd be like, "Oh, lovely old lady," Like, that's just how I was brought up, and they're the values that I believe a lot of Australian values have been built on, no matter what our background is.
So but you're a success story within the community. Why is it that, statistically speaking, a lot of people, as I said, like obviously, the government panders a lot to the minority, which is obviously the Aboriginal community, but at the same time, there are so many Aboriginals who are succeeding and doing well, who are not doing that. So is is intervention wrong? Because a lot of people say the West shouldn't intervene in Saudi Arabia because that's their culture, even though they're killing their women, they're doing honor killings, things that are happening all kind of somewhat in your own community. I'm not saying that they do honor killings. I'm not too sure. That's just me speaking. But I think intervention sometimes is necessary for something to be right. What do you think about that?
Well, I think, I think what's happening is, I get called names like, "Oh, you're an assimilationist."
Ooh, scary.
Oh my God, I've taken advantage of the modern world. Wow. That's where, again, why the hell should my people not be allowed to become part of the modern world because they're part of the world's oldest living culture? Why is it?
Exactly. Boom.
Why is it that why is it that the rest of the world can progress, but we've got to remain as museum pieces, for all to look at and ogle over and go, "Oh my God, aren't they beautiful, wonderful beings?" Like as if we're separate from humanity, like.
Smart. That's such a good way to look at it. Look at you. Yeah, that's very true. I didn't think of. Yeah, it's like you're in an exhibit at a museum. That's
Yeah.
so true.
And it's so paternalistic. The left are far more paternalistic than what the right are. The right are about, everyone's got an opportunity to be something, but how you get there is all up to you. The left is all about, "Oh, you poor, hard done by thing, you shouldn't have to lift a finger. We'll do everything for you, but do nothing for you at the same time." And, I'm just,
It's bad.
it's so frustrating. It is so frustrating. And like you get attitudes like, for example, like there might be, I remember hearing this story from a young woman that I knew who'd been out to a community, and she said she was talking to a young Aboriginal mother, and the mother was sitting there and sort of with her baby, and there was like rubbish around the place, and a plate with food on it that she was feeding a baby from, and a used nappy sitting on that plate. And she said, I almost told her that, she shouldn't do that, that it's unhygienic. And I said, you almost? Like, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you say something? It's like this, this thing about being polite. Like, but being polite means that people are dying. We're going to be that nice,
really
but we're going to let people die.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, and if you actually give a shit about somebody, if you really care for someone, you will be completely honest with them, even if that honesty hurts, even if they get upset about it. And that's the problem with all this taking offense. We can't be honest because all these people are getting hurt feelings. Well, they need to learn how to take care of their own feelings because it's nobody else's responsibility except their own.
Yeah, someone in the chat wrote that you are conflating issues. How moronic. But you're not. You're Aboriginal. I don't think the person writing that is Aboriginal, so I don't really think they have a place to say what they're saying.
Conflating issues. So having to, identify the body of my cousin after she's just been involved in an alcohol-induced car crash, and now having to take care of her suicidal daughter is conflating issues, is taking home with me a baby in my family that's been through alcohol, raged violence between its parents and having to care for it overnight. That's conflated? I don't think so. Having to pick up my auntie's body and put it into a body bag with the rest of my family in a town camp, that's not conflated. Like this is the life that I live, and every single day you cannot step away from it. It's like my mother when she was a minister of the Crown. Other ministers, non-Aboriginal ministers, they could go home, shut the door, and go to sleep. It wasn't the case for her. She was there's still issues going on. There's still, somebody who's passed away because of alcohol or because of, avoidable, illness. That if they'd just gone to the doctor, they would have been able to sort out. But suddenly everyone thinks it's sorcery, and now someone's got to get payback. Like people don't get it, and you can call it conflated, but you're removed from it, obviously.
It's not conflated. I just thought I'd read it out to you. It's not conflated at all. You're coming from a place of knowledge. You're coming from a place of statistics as well as firsthand experience. I don't think any of us really have a right to. I mean, we can obviously have an opinion based on what we see, but we can't speak to your experiences, so that they can just lay off. I just thought I would let you know what was said.
All good.
Well, this is irrelevant to the whole entire topic, and I don't want to spend too long on it. But are you pro-life?
Pro-life. I am. Yeah, I'm certainly pro-life.
You're not for abortions.
I think well, you know what? That I have. In some cases, I think it's acceptable, but I certainly don't believe in late term. Absolutely not late term. And I'm especially with what's been the debate that's going on at the moment, and particularly I think I read an article today where specialists were trying to argue that infanticide should be accepted.
There's post-abortions as well. Yeah.
So no, but in really serious circumstances, I think I would accept abortion, but otherwise,
Sorry, it was irrelevant to the discussion. I just like to know. I don't know. I feel like most of us who are right wing, even though we are definitely more diverse in our thoughts, and people are allowed to not be pro-life, that's fine, but usually that's one of the check marks of being a right-wing person for the most. It sounds like you're predominantly pro-life except for certain caveats. It sounds
yeah.
Something else I wanted to ask you was regarding the recent election. How do you think you went, and what could have been done differently? And what's your future in politics, if that's
Well,
okay to ask?
sure. Well, that's still got a lot of thinking ahead for me to do with regard to my future in politics. I know there's a lot of immediate work that I've got to get to, addressing all of those issues that I've just been talking about. In terms of,
I wish you luck.
the election, I guess what was really disappointing for me was that I would be okay with the result if I knew that it was if it was a fair fight. But what I witnessed was, the kind of paternalism from the left, that the worst kind of paternalism, and the fact that we're deployed by Labor in remote communities absolutely disgusted me, because
Tell us
that,
what's happening. I don't know. I don't know about this.
well,
Educate me.
okay, so, well, basically, they went particularly hard because I'm sure because I was the candidate. I mean, I'd won over all the main centres, except for Tennant Creek, but I'd won all the main centres, and quite overwhelmingly in some parts. But in much of the remote communities, the incumbent won up to 90% of the vote in some places, and that tells me that something really strange is going on, because not even a North Korean dictator could get that much percentage of a vote. And there are all kinds of tactics that are used in remote communities. I mean, I had people coming to me and telling me that, certain people were promised, money and vehicles and shopping, food.
Handouts.
Handouts. Lies were told. If we tried to talk about policy and the fact that, we wanted to improve the CDP program and Labor wanted to scrap it, trying to tell people that, Labor would suddenly turn around and say, no, we want to keep it, we want to make it better, and we want to do this and we want to do that. Really, just insulting people's intelligence, the way that they would straight up lie to them. And they'd also they'd get their heavies out there. So they'd smother the place with, red shirts. They'd pay locals there to hand out how to vote. They had, in one community, over the loudspeaker, they had it going all day. We had been told that the unions had provided a donation to that radio station. So all day in language, they were being told to vote Labor. They would have their people going to inside the voting area, where they weren't supposed to be. And because the AEC don't speak the local language, they don't know that the person yelling out in the middle of the room is telling people constantly to vote for Labor, that they're doing those sorts of things. You have to have scrutineers at every single booth to come down on this behaviour, because the AEC don't do anything about it. Basically, they don't do a thing about it. So it's effectively corrupt behaviour that's allowed to go on in remote communities, and there are double standards in this country when it comes to that voting process. It is not democratic, and I've just been, the last couple of elections I've been involved in, with my mother running in the territory and with me with this, has just completely and utterly disgusted me and opened my eyes. And really, a review needs to take place. Even a royal commission needs to take place in remote communities.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It is really, I took people out there who'd never been out remote polling. They could not believe their eyes. I mean, we had other representatives from other organisations going, this is appalling behaviour. And this is Labor, who think that they're the champion for the Indigenous person, but yet they will not allow an Indigenous person to take part in a democratic process in a democratic manner.
Do you think maybe if you ever run again, this is just me spitballing, and you don't have to have me along for the ride, but maybe make a documentary about it?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
The more people that get out there, the better.
Yeah, I've been thinking about venturing into something like that, or at least the conditions of what the Indigenous people are struggling with. And no one's going to make a story like that because it is so taboo, because you're not allowed to say anything against the Aboriginal people because of what we did. Well, not we. I'm a first generation Australian, so I'm not British, but because of what we did. But if someone made like a documentary about it and spent some time and then saw like the violence that is happening, that is occurring, I mean, it would wake some people up. It won't matter to some people anyway. Some people won't give a shit because, you know, it won't matter. Because it's like with the white South African farmers. We know that they're suffering. We know they're being murdered. We know that their insides are being cut up and pulled out of their bodies. We know that 4-year-olds have been boiled in hot water. These are things we know that's happening in South Africa, but people still choose to deny it. I actually have South Africans coming on my channel in 2 weeks, if white South Africans, if anyone wants to tune into that, that's happening 2 weeks from now, to talk about what the Africans are doing to the whites. But I think it's interesting what the Aboriginals are doing to the Aboriginals and what the government is permitting. Don't you think it'd be good if someone like yourself did something like that and tried to like put together something to you know, and then do like a presentation, do some sort of a premiere of the problems that are happening, and reveal it, because who's going to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I am in the process of putting together a documentary which is exploring.
I want my check. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, which is exploring the whole area of
Good.
family violence and those issues, and the way in which the victims are effectively silenced and silenced by their own mob, you know, and exploring that. So that is something that I'm currently working on at the moment. So yeah, you're the first person to know this publicly.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know this. I was just saying someone should do something. I didn't know you were actually doing it.
No.
That's okay. Okay, exclusive for me. That's hilarious. I got an exclusive from you.
But that's all I'll say on it for now.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
But yeah, look, not enough people do know what's really going on in communities, and I think we need to open these communities up and bring them into the fold. And there are a lot of gatekeepers in communities who like to control things, you know, non-Indigenous people who like to control things and feel they have control over communities, and they're going to control the way that the locals think and vote and all those sorts of things. And it can't happen anymore. You know, we're Australia and it's 2019, and you know, if we want to bring people into the fold, well, we need to open it up to that. And communities need to, you know, I know there's some communities that want to be part of the wider Australian community, and they're going to have to come up with that decision themselves to open themselves up. But it's certainly something that, you know, I want to encourage for the benefit of all, for all Australians, but mostly the most, you know, marginalised, who feel like they're you know, out of sight, out of mind to the rest of Australia.
What are your thoughts on okay, so we were mentioning before the word assimilation, but a big part of being a nationalist means believing that every single people group has a right to exist in their own language, in their own community, and that basically almost that segregation is okay. That's what certain nationalists believe. But at the same time, obviously the white British came to Australia, settled the land and colonized it, building the Australia that we function under today. The Australia that functioned prior to the white people being here was a different Australia. That's just a fact. There's nothing wrong with that. But so what do you say to people who want to preserve? So just to play devil's advocate here, maybe what the left wants, and I know what they really want, but just to pretend that they actually want to do something noble, maybe what they want is to preserve the language of these Aboriginal people, of this culture, of this particular people group, because each people group is so unique and different, and to lose that would be sad. And I can see that perspective as someone who, you know, has nationalistic undertones. I think it would be like, for example, the Mayans. They don't exist anymore. Where are the Mayans? That's sad. So if people hadn't interbred, and I'm the product of a mixed race relationship. My dad's from Spain, my mum's from Colombia. Doesn't sound mixed race, but it is. you're mixed race as well, you're half white, you're half black, to lose a people group would be sad. What are your thoughts on just everything I just said?
Well, I get that, the importance of language. I know it's difficult. I think it's difficult because the problem with a lot of Indigenous languages is unless you've got a lot of people to talk to them, talk to others with it, it's, naturally that's why languages have died off. And you don't really know a culture until, unless you speak the language of that culture to really get it, to really understand it.
So we should take your word as gospel and not what lefty white people claim. Sorry, keep going.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, and I see that there are those wanting to revive their languages, and they're doing that job, and they're trying to revive their languages. Some of those languages won't ever be spoken exactly how they were originally spoken, because quite often, there's no speakers around, or it hasn't been heard spoken. So it's just sort of, it's guessing how it might be spoken, and whether that's sustainable or not, I'm not sure. It's nice to share those sorts of things because it's part of our our makeup as Australians all together. I think that's nice. Ultimately, education in English is going to create outcomes, and
Yes.
the provide the tools for modern day survival and thriving, which is what my mother was able to do, and also speak her own language. And that wasn't because of any kind of bilingual program. That was because she, her parents at home taught her that language, and she learned English properly at school as well. And it's part of the reason why I guess I don't speak Warlpiri fluently, because she wanted me to learn English, learn the English language in order to get a really solid education. So I get that, and I've worked as a cross-cultural consultant and cross-cultural as an educator.
Yeah, but you're conflating everything apparently.
I'm totally conflating everything. But for the benefit, one, because creating cultural understanding is how we get to the heart of issues, how we get to understand one another better, how we get to address our problems better, and be able to get meaningful support to address our problems as well. So and is recognizing where we're coming from when we do different things, when we behave particular ways, like we traditionally Aboriginal way, you don't look people in the eye, that's considered dodgy.
Okay.
That's considered dodgy. So Aboriginal people don't look you in the eye because that's rude. Whereas, the white fellow way, you look someone in the eye when you're speaking to them, because otherwise it's disrespectful. So it's when we have those understandings, we're not judging one another the wrong way. We're going, oh, I get that. So I mean, and language can do that, but I guess it's all about what is sustainable, as well. It's nice to it's nice, but it's nice in a sort of like preserving art kind of way, I guess, as opposed to that some of those languages aren't going to be about providing you those tools to deal with this modern world. But yeah, so does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. It does, because you're basically saying that it's all well and good to try, but it's never going to be exactly the same, and that it's almost like insulting to the Aboriginal people that, like, it's like saying that they can't learn English. It's like saying that they don't have the capacity, and they do. We're just we're infantilizing them too much, so they can assimilate. I'm sure they'd be completely successful if given the chance, but people keep them keeping them in their own form of slavery by keeping them confined in that area. I know what you're saying. Yeah. What are your thoughts on what was I going to ask you? I forgot now. But hang on, I'll go to my notes. There was something that came to my mind before. Where is it? Oh, yeah, white people. Okay, so what are your thoughts specifically on the fact that do you believe that white people today are starting, like, I think we're only at the beginning of it, but do you think that it's fair to say that they are beginning to be an oppressed class, even by leftist whites against right-wing whites? Do you believe that we are entering a phase in this new age, this history now, that white people will be the new oppressed class?
I think we're heading in that direction. I think,
Mm.
I think we, like, if you've got dark skin, you can't do anything wrong unless you're a conservative dark skinned person.
Oh, yeah.
but, but if you're a white person, it's almost like you're the devil just for existing with that color skin nowadays.
Mm.
And I think the pendulum has swung far too much in the opposite direction, and if we want to achieve equality, then it's recognizing that we're all, we're human beings, we're all the same species. And what really I get aggro with is this whole idea that because you've got white skin, suddenly, you've got these privileges that us dark-skinned people don't have, which is utter nonsense. It's all up here. I personally, like I said earlier, it is my view that I am same as everyone else. I'm equal to everybody else, no matter what their background is, no matter what their skin color is. So you've got to take ownership for who you are, I believe. And again, if you're saying, you've got all this privilege and you've got this and you've got that more than me, again, it's handing your power over to somebody else once more. And, look around on the streets of Melbourne. I see white people. I see white homeless people. Are they privileged because of the color of their skin?
Yes.
No, they're not.
No, they're not. But that's the narrative. That's the belief.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, like, I think of my father. Because he's a white old man. They're the worst kind. White old men are.
I've seen him. I saw him on Insight.
Yeah.
Your dad, he's a darling.
But because he's a white man, he's not allowed to talk about Indigenous issues. As far as the left are concerned, even though all his life this is his family that we're talking about. Aboriginal people are his family. He is part of the fabric of who we are. When my family don't refer to him by his name, they refer to him by his skin name, Jangala. That's who he is within
our.
What
does that
mean? So we all belong. We've all got skin names. Our skin name is part of our kinship structure. So,
what's my skin name?
Well, I'd have to come up with one, I guess, depending on how well we get along. I'd have to decide whether I'll call you sister or cousin or maybe I'll make you a niece and then you have to call me auntie. But
I don't think we're that far apart in age. You're in your 30s?
I am, yes.
So am I. Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to be sisters then.
Awesome. I'm a racist, but I'm excited about being a sister.
Yeah, that comes with obligations. I'll fill you all in all that later.
Oh yeah, well, we'll turn the chat off. Not the chat. We'll go off live in a moment. But I still have a few more questions I want to ask you. Sure. So sorry, your father's name. What does it mean? Oh, so it's just a thing. It's just a thing that happens in Aboriginal communities, or just your family?
It makes him part of like entire communities. I mean, different. Okay. We've got an 8-name system. With a male and female version of each name. There's other skin name structures throughout the territory with different. So yeah, different sort of structures. But I can go to the top end of Australia and tell them, I'm Number Yinba. So they say, oh well, that's Bulan. We call that Bulan. So then I fit into their structure, and then suddenly I've got aunties and uncles and mums and dads.
That's nice.
So yeah, so that's what that's about. But and that's who my dad is as far as my family are concerned. And I got interviewed once by a local online paper who don't like me and I don't like them very much.
Is this called? Are they known as people who like to guard other people?
Oh yeah, well they like to trash people whenever they get the chance.
The Guardian is not trustworthy. It's not real news. Yeah, # fake news.
Trashed me all over the place. #.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
But but they put it to me. They said to me in the last as a counsellor. So in the 12th council that I was in previously, there were a lot of old grumpy white men, as it was put to me, grumpy old white men, and I thought it was strange that I happened to be an Aboriginal conservative. The title of
Oh,
was like surprise conservative, and
that pisses me off so much. Okay.
and I was asked, how is it, you're an Aboriginal woman, how is it that you get on with, grumpy old white men? And I just was like,
I'm half white. I identify as both things.
not only that, but I'm simply human,
Yeah.
And as far as I'm sitting in those chambers and in that room, I am equal. They regard me as equal. And and yeah, I have a soft spot for grumpy old white men because my dad won.
Yeah, you're half white. My God. Is that okay?
My dad is one, like I just thought it was just ridiculous, dividing along the lines of race. And, is it because I'm an Aboriginal woman that somehow I should see myself as different to grumpy old white men, or somehow see myself as a victim to them? Or what is it I'm supposed to see myself?
You're supposed to see yourself as a victim. I watched this video ages ago. It was Blair Cottrell on some show called Hack Live. And there was this Aboriginal girl, very pretty, beautiful girl, short curly hair, she had blonde hair, but she didn't acknowledge her white ancestry at all. It's like it didn't exist, even though she's very not diluted, that's the wrong word. She looks predominantly white. She could pass for white, but she's very pretty. And she said, "I am the Warrangupi people, and I am this, and I am that." But then but at no point did she ever feel the need to state that she was also white. And I'm like, well, what's wrong with also being part white? Like, that's okay. And that's an attitude that the Aboriginal community and leftism holds at large, correct?
To the left, well, there are those within those that identify as Aboriginal in that community that hold, that sort of thinking. And I mean, in some ways, I can see where it's coming from, because people want to hold on to whatever, whatever they can, because they've
I understand it. Yeah.
so much. But yeah, at the same time, you also can't deny who you are entirely. I mean, my nephew, who I'd mentioned earlier, he's one of the best historians in our family, and although he's half Warlpiri, he's also knows a hell of a lot about the other side of our family, and is doing a lot of
That's good.
doing a lot of digging around and finding out a lot about who we are, and the fact that my great grandfather was brought over from Hampshire. At the age of 17, he was a farmhand, and he'd been caught break and enter. So he got sent over here for 40 years. Obviously, he never went back, but at the age of 17, so he's removed from his family. And he was a Protestant, brought up Protestant, but married, and my great-great-grandmother, who was brought up Catholic, she was brought over from Ireland as an orphan because her parents died in the potato famine, And that's the other thing, is that if you want to go by intergenerational trauma, then I should be utterly traumatized, considering what those ancestors went through on that side. And my ancestors on the other side had incredibly tough life as well. But
yeah, but white people don't suffer.
No, that's right, because you've got magics. You're not even white. Sorry, no.
I don't know what I am. It's so confusing.
Magic, the magic skin, white skin that apparently stops any kind of suffering.
Yeah, I come from Spain. I suppose that can be considered European white, and then Colombians look more Native American.
Sorry, I'm going to plug in my. I'm realizing I'm running out of battery here.
Hey, you didn't prepare for me? I'm insulted. No.
I was on full battery, but we've been talking for some time.
We have. I'm sorry. Well, it's almost the full hour, 8:15 to 9:15, which is a different time zone for you. I understand. But okay. So you're doing things to help bring attention to your community. That's really good. What do you think is ahead for you politically?
Politically, well, at the moment I'm having a break.
Fair enough. That's completely justified.
I'm always political, I guess. It's always there. It's always in the back of my mind. It's always you know, I don't think you're going to see the end of me. That's for sure.
I don't want to see the end of you. I want to see you boom.
But yeah, I've got a lot of very exciting work and research coming up, as well as speaking tours through Arrow. So I get the opportunity to, you know, get in front of audiences around the country and discuss some of these issues, and hopefully also engage with the audience and do some question and answer and that sort of thing too. Probably be writing a book, and of course, you know that there's this idea of a documentary as well. So few things happening.
Lots of things happening. That's very exciting. Do you know who you're going to go with for your book? For your book, because off air, I'll tell you some things that I think you might want to know.
Sure. Well, I have had
offers.
Yeah, I have had offers. So, yeah,
well, that's good.
Certainly, you know, talk to me off air.
Oh no, I will. Just before we finish, I want to get to the nitty gritty of some things that happened as a kid. You were called a coconut by, was it by? Oh no, it wasn't. You were called a coconut by George Hanna, a fellow
a Greens candidate.
But he was also Aboriginal, correct?
Apparently.
Oh, okay. So it's not evident. It's not evident in his face.
Yeah, I guess he could be Indigenous. He might also look like he has a bit of Asian or something there as well in the mix. You know, it looks like he comes from Darwin. You know, mixed background.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Okay, so because there was a whole article about everything that went on because of something that you said. The Liberal candidate for the Northern Territory seat of Lingiari, Jacinta Price, is again under fire for using social media to post anti-Islamic content and for dismissing an Aboriginal man for being white. That's the best thing I've ever read.
What is that? Where was that written? That's hilarious.
That was on The Guardian.
Oh, of course.
Of course.
Dismissing an Aboriginal man for looking white.
Apparently, that's what you tend to do.
Well, I just did it then, hey? Did I do that then? No.
I suppose you did it again, but
I don't even remember how I did that in the first place. I'll have to read that article and see what nonsense they've regurgitated.
Yeah. Well, I think it's funny because I think what's funny is that they're claiming things that they don't really know what they're saying. They're just saying it so to escalate your notoriety, so to speak. And what you've said about the Aboriginal community to me sounds very similar to the Islamic community. Is that something that you're also passionate about, like women's rights in that world? Because
I'm passionate about women's rights, you know, in whatever community or, you know, culture that they come from that oppresses, you know, their human rights.
I would agree.
You know, it's the same sort of thing. You know, it's very similar to women in, you know, in Native Canadian women and Native American women as well. You know, this whole idea that we've got to belong.
It happens in Latin America too.
Our race, yeah, that's right. We've got to belong to our race, and therefore our rights are diminished in favour of our race, the rights of, well, the ethnic group that we belong to in entirety. And the idea that, you know, the Western idea and, you know, Western feminism, you know, there's this idea that no, we don't go near other women's cultures, you know. It's ridiculous.
They should. Like, I'm not a feminist. I would never say I am a feminist, but I would easily say I'm a feminist if I was living in that community. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, and for the ABC to come after me for sharing that particular video was disgusting. It was a total, you know, I'm pretty sure the journalist, Gordon Oliver, who I believe is in Alice Springs, probably came from somewhere like Melbourne and thought that he could use, you know, the sort of usual ABC left tactics against me being a conservative Aboriginal woman in an attempt to paint me as an Islamophobe because I shared the video of a woman who does what I do and speak about the oppressive aspects of my own culture, and she was talking about that within her own faith, and then, get comment from the Imam Council of Australia to say that video was Islamophobic and try to say that this could incite violence against Muslims. And I'm like, hang on a second, silencing this woman's voice is like inciting more violence against women and encouraging violence against women. Like, if you speak out about these things from within your own culture or within your own faith, then she's putting her life in danger to do that, but to then get shut down by these, self-righteous bloody journalists who think they know what's best, it just disgusts me. I mean, he should be ashamed of himself for trying to do that, and also to dog whistle to those possible extremists out there that I could then become a target. Like, and and this news, was just ridiculous. It took up time within the media when there were far more important issues to be addressed. And of course, the Guardian didn't pick up on it, did they? No, they just wanted to go. They wanted to go with that narrative, and nor were they prepared to have a go at this other individual for his racial slur in calling me a coconut, and which is basically the Guardian saying it's all right for Aboriginal people to treat other Aboriginal people that way.
How stupid!
Racial vilification against them. They condone that clearly.
Yeah, well, racism is allowed between the races, and they call it colorism. It's just racism. There's no need to like gallivant between the words.
No.
Yeah, but I also think that what you say about Islam would not be condemned by other Muslims. People like the Imam Tawhidi would probably be completely on board with.
He's totally on board. He and I are mates. Like,
I was speaking to him on the phone recently.
Yeah, we send messages of support to one another,
He was very happy when he found out that we were doing an interview.
Yeah.
He goes, oh, that's good. He goes, that's good. Interview her. She's fantastic. I'm like, I know.
Yeah, that's right. And when we don't fit like the ABC's narrative, they try to silence us. They try to shut us down and try and paint us, that which we are not.
It's insane, isn't it? Well, I think we've spoken for a very long time. I'm very happy. I wish we could go for longer. Someone just sent me a super chat, so I'm compelled to read it, even though I don't want to. It says, "Hey dear, do you want to debate a lefty? Debate Vaush, Vaush. I don't know who that is, and I don't tend to step. I'm assuming it's an Aboriginal lefty or something. I'm not sure who that is." But I don't do debates on my channel. Also, I would only do a debate if I was really completely researched on the subject. So to answer the question, no, I don't do debates, so I won't be debating that person. I might look them up after the live stream, though. But thank you for the $2. All right. Is there anything you want to say before I take it off air?
Oh, just thanks. It's been a nice chat, and yeah, no, it's been good, and I've now got the wonderful opportunity. I've kicked off fan subscription on my Facebook page, and I want to be able to, I guess, hold roundtables through with my fans and that sort of thing. So if people are interested and want to have these kind of chats online, I'll be setting that sort of thing up. And it's only $3.99 a month, which is like, it's like shouting me half a cup of coffee. And and it's to support me to be able to do things like write a book and create a documentary and all those sorts of things. And there's heaps of like fan content that only fans get to have. And right now, if you're part of the first 22 subscribe, you will get a free ticket to one of my talks.
Oh, well, see, thankfully I don't have to be one of the first 22 because I was already promised a ticket.
You're a lucky one. You are.
I'm pretty lucky. So anyone else, I will add it. I didn't know that she was going to say that, or I would have had the link in the description box below already. But I will add that after. But guys who are watching and are interested, first 22 to subscribe to Jacinta's, what's it called? Roundtable.
Just on my page, the fan subscription. Yeah, first subscribers. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, cool. Well, I will add your page in the link description box below so that people can like your page, and we can cross promote our pages as well.
Cool.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks guys for tuning in. Next Wednesday, I have Ricardo Bossi coming on my channel. He's formerly part of the now deteriorated Australian Conservatives. So we're going to have a very interesting conversation with him. He's considered Australia's next Trump. So if anyone wants to watch that, please do so. And tomorrow I have Dean McRae and Tammy Candy coming on my channel to discuss the event that we did last week, Femininity versus Feminism. Okay. Bye, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in, and tune in tomorrow and also next Wednesday. Tomorrow will be 9 o'clock, not 8 o'clock. Okay. Bye-bye. Bye, guys. Say bye, Jacinta.
Bye.